Hello, welcome. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about some setup tips for the KMD-FR02. So the first thing we're going to look at are the tires, as they're the most important part of any Mini Z handling. So as you can see here, I have some Marca tires in the rear, and I double side taped the tires to the rims, and then I used some super glue to glue the outside lip and inside lip all the way around both tires. The rear tires I just trued enough to make sure that the tires were running perfectly symmetrical. And on the front tires I took about 2 millimeters off the tire in order to get the tire just to bite a little bit less on corner entry, and also to have a little bit more response. I'm using PN firm tires in the front for this setup, and Marca rear tires. They don't actually make any other tire temperature as far as I know. With my front setup, if I turn this around, you can see I'm using the blue spring collar and the I guess rose gold spring, so it's a little bit firm. It's one of the more firm springs that we offer in our kit. And I'm using about 0 degrees caster, so as you can see it's pushed all the way forward. You can see a little bit of the metal collar there. I don't know if you can get that on the picture. Let me see over here. Yeah, there you can see that the collar is pushed all the way forward, and about 1 degree camber. I have quite a bit of ride height in the front, and maybe I would say that's like 4 or 5 millimeters of ride height, and then as it slopes towards the back here, the ride height gets much lower. So I do that always with pretty much all of my Mini Z setups. That's just the way I like to drive it. It prevents the nose from diving and gripping on corner entry, so you can actually be a little bit more aggressive on corner entry, especially high speed corners. For our toe, I'm actually using a little bit of toe out, probably about 1 or 2 degrees. I switched the stock springs for the center shock to the red shock, so it gives a little bit of a softer rear suspension. So this allows the rear suspension to squat down under acceleration, so that I can get a little bit more grip out of the corners. I've also put some Kyosho 15,000 diff grease on the rod, but just a tiny little bit. And if I push down here, you can see the suspension movement. For my droop, I've limited the amount of droop, so you can see that when I pull up on the chassis, the droop is limited. So once again, that's preventing the forward weight transfer during deacceleration, so that's corner entry. So as you can see, the droop screws turned in quite a bit. For my side shocks here, I've gone a little bit softer than stock, so I've switched to the yellow springs, and just to allow the rear of the chassis to roll a little bit more, once again keeping the rear a little bit more planted. So as you can see, I've adjusted the preload so that I get equal amounts of steering on either side. So with these cars, because the diff is very elongated, and there's a little bit more weight on the right side compared to the left side, most of the time you're gonna have to have not equal adjustments between the two side shocks in terms of their droop. So my left shock turned in a little bit more than my right shock in terms of droop. Good. One thing that we've been doing, or that I've been noticing, is that with these Suave speed controllers, that they are susceptible to static buildup and static shock, and we've been having some of them shut down because of that. So one thing that I've done here is I have actually attached a ground wire, so that goes from the negative terminal on the Suave controller, and then I've actually put a screw, so a machine screw, all the way through. So I've put it from the bottom there, it goes through the entire chassis, so it touches both carbon fiber plates, and then secured it to the top there. And that's actually helped us in terms of the ESC shutting off because of static buildup. So that's if you're experiencing the same thing, that's a little trick that you can do as well. You're using a 9 pinion or a 10 pinion standard with the 53 spur gear. And the spur gear is just a normal spur gear. One big thing that you can notice here is that I've actually cut off the little lip so that the lip doesn't rub against the tire. So if the lip rubs against the tire, then of course that's going to affect the handling. With the F1s, have to be very careful with the pinion gears, that the pinion gear doesn't pop out and rub against the rear tire as well. So this one's actually really close. I'm going to have to probably push it back in just to make sure that it's not touching the right rear tire. These side arms are very, very important. So you have to make sure that they don't tilt up. So especially this part here, you're going to make sure that that screw is really tight and that the arm can't move. You want this screw here to be a little bit loose so that the arm can move up and down freely, but over down here you want it to be nice and tight. Okay, there shouldn't be any wiggling left and right, so when you move the rear end you shouldn't feel any play whatsoever. So another tip when building and tuning your KMD-FR02 is to, of course, make sure that all of these ball joints where the knuckle inserts into the front, top and bottom suspension arms, as well as the back here where the ball inserts into the main chassis for the rear suspension movement, that those are all very, very smooth and that there's very little binding. So when you press down on the suspension, it should be very, very smooth. There should be no binding points, no sticky points. And same with the rear. When you push down on the rear, you should feel the suspension compress, and it should feel equal so that it doesn't get stiffer and stiffer and stiffer as you press. It should stiff. One of the main things in the rear to make sure that that happens is that your arms are nice and straight, but also that you don't have any wires that are getting bound or stuck in either the chassis or against the body. So that's something you're going to definitely need to figure out. So the best way I found, so that you can easily put on the body without it rubbing anything, is to run the wires this way. So I have 2 wires coming from the engine going out underneath the droop collar, the side suspension arm, and then one of them going actually down through the middle here, and then the other cable for the sensor from the motor to the ESC to go on the other side here, so on the left spring, and also it goes past the collar so that there's free suspension movement. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully your car handles just as good as mine does. Thanks.